So the Omega Speedmaster Mark II date wheel has caught my attention, and I thought, why don't I show you guys what I'm talking about? Because I don't think this is an error at all. I don't think this is a problem. What I think this is a characteristic of the watch industry and this enthusiastic hobby, I suppose. It's things like this that make these pieces of mechanical art, very, very interesting. Now, today's the 4th, and I actually have the 4th on the date register at 6 o'clock just there. And I don't know if you can see, I'll zoom in, but I'll show you some photographs in a moment of the number 4, and you can see obviously its font style. Now, if I bring up the racing dial, you might already be able to tell that the number 4 is slightly different. If I bring these both up, you can probably, there you go, look at that. There's the font of the 4 on the black and white dial, and there's the font of the 4 on the grey and orange dial. Now, I will insert some photos right now because I think this might be better. And if I pop in the first photo of the number 1, you can see the difference between the fonts there. And if you look at the 1 on the grey and orange dial against the 1 on the black dial, you can see the difference there. And if I scroll through and if I go back and forward on the number 1, you can see the font is slightly different. Now, I suppose a person could say, hold on, this is a defect because the date wheel is it will be the exact same size, and you might expect that the design of it is identical. But I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think Omega will have thought about this, and either this is intentional or it's something to do with the production run of the date wheel for each model. Now, the serial numbers of both these watches does indicate that the black dial was manufactured before the orange and grey dial. But what is interesting is that the birth certificate of both these watches is actually the same month and the same year of last year. So, both these watches are actually babies, really. But let me show you number 2. And you can see there that the number 2 font is different. For someone like me, this just causes intrigue and interest because there is a nice difference. And for us collectors, these differences make they are the cause of a lot of interest and intrigue, and you can see how cool that is. And if I scroll through the 4 and the 5, I'm actually showing these slides and talking over at the same time, and hopefully I'll got that. But what you can see here is that we have 6, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 that all look the grey and orange dial fonts are slightly different to the black and white dial. But then we get to number 10. Now, from the photos here, the photographs I've taken, the 10 on both date wheels is the same. So my thought was, what Omega have done here is they've changed the font for numbers 1 to 9 on the date wheel that goes in the grey and orange dial, and that's what we have. And for me, it creates so much intrigue. I would say on the face of it right now, I prefer the font on the grey and orange dial because it's slightly larger, but I still like the font on the black and white dial. But you can see that 11, for example, it seems to go back to the same font for both date wheels. So I'm thinking it looks like that the font on the date wheel, the differential is for numbers 1 to 9 only, because you can see number 12 there is the same on both date wheels. And if I randomly jump forward to 13, we can see that 13 is the same font. Then if I go to 15, that is the same font. Then I go to 18. That's definitely, I'm taking a sample here from numbers 10 upwards, and so 18 is the same. And so as I've glanced through the date wheels, all the numbers, the font is the same from 11 to 31. And you can see I'm showing 24 here, and that's the same font. And then I think I've gone ahead to 31. Yeah, so we've got the same font at 31. So my reference here against these two Speedmaster Mark IIs, the orange and grey dial, the birth certificate is last year, 2023, and it's actually in coincidence both watches received their birth certificate in the same month last year. I didn't get them at the same time. That's just the coincidence, and you know, it makes them very special also. And I think the date wheel fonts being different also makes them very special. And I've got a feeling that the reason for the font difference on the grey and orange dial, the fonts number 1 to 9, I think what that is, it is a manufacturing update that Omega introduced on their production line for the Speedmaster Mark II, and the serial numbers of the watches would indicate that. So the chunkier fonts 1 to 9 I think could be, it's either related to the grey and orange dial only, or it's simply a different font version because the date wheel was produced later for both or all of the Mark IIs that have a black background date wheel. So that's my expectation. I don't think this is because you know, it's an error or that the watch is fake or anything. I think it's a very nice design characteristic that Omega have intentionally done. And for me, it makes these watches very special. And if I go back to the watches now, when I opened the boxes, I had them that way, and I realized that my photos were that way, so I've swapped them over. This is what happens when you do things like the way I do it, which is, you know, a one take, and I do it on the cuff. I find if I actually had to make these videos with a script or something, it would take forever and I wouldn't have time. So I make these videos like this, and I really try to not have to shoot it again. So there you go. And actually, whilst I've got the light coming through, you can see the orange hue on the ring, on the inside ring. You can't see the ring when you're head on, when you're looking down the barrel like that. You have to put it on its side, but you can see the orange hue of the ring on the grey and orange dial there. The black and white one has the same ring, but it looks like a grey colour. So it's obviously not as colour contrasting against the black dial here, whereas the orange one contrast is greater, so you can see it. But again, it's another design characteristic that makes these watches so interesting. Look at that. And once again, don't these watches look so good? And I've just thought of something else. Notice the time on these watches. Now, these watches were set, I think I set them about this time yesterday, perhaps a little bit later. And I've noticed that both watches have gained about, it could be, I might be able to tell in a moment, roughly they've gained about 2 seconds. And in a rough 24-hour period, gaining 2 seconds with the dial up, that is probably within all the tight specifications that you can think of. That means that the regulation of these seems to be working. But the other thing that makes them appear that they might be it might be working very well is look how accurate they both are. There's a fraction of a second difference between the no, in fact, they look almost identical. I'm looking at the viewfinder here, so it's very difficult to actually see the second hands. But these have been running for about the same time, and they look, the grey and orange is slightly faster, but that is fraction of a second, I would say, perhaps not even a second. And they've both gained about 2 seconds in the dial-up position. So that is very interesting, and if you're a watch geek, that sort of thing is going to be so pleasing for you, because it's like having 2 machines running away, you know, in your car or somewhere, and you know they're ticking over very nicely. And because these are mechanical watches, and they've most probably been regulated by Omega in the factory. In fact, I'm sure that they have. And they meet the specifications that Omega want them to have before they leave the factory, which is very accurate actually. You can see that we are achieving that. So I thought that was interesting and something to point out. And I'm sure that I've set these before, and the grey and orange dial has been slightly faster, noticeably faster over a 24-hour period. But maybe that's because it was wound not as much, or wound a bit more, and maybe it wasn't dial up. But these were definitely wound the same, and they were both placed to dial up overnight. So perhaps, in fact, yeah, you could draw upon from that information that is because you know why they are so tightly in tolerance to each other. So there you go. Anyway, a bit of an interesting video about fonts and date wheels and accuracy of the Omega 333 movement. I think it's the 0333 movement, which is an automatic movement. It's a great movement actually. And also I love the date function, and I know it has a date selector on the side, and for some people they might be thinking, but why isn't the date function inside the crown? Now I believe that the reason for that is that because this is a Valgio based movement, normally the movement is like that, and so Omega have switched, have put the Valgio based movement, they've turned it 90 degrees, and they've lost the day, but they've opened up the window down at 6, and apparently moving the movement that way to that way, that's why that they can't put actually I don't really know, but I imagine there's a very good technical reason why they've stuck the date selector on the side. I think I perhaps would have preferred the date selection on the crown, but saying that, right now in this configuration, what I do like about the crown is you can simply wind it at any time because it's not screw down. So I can wind that crown right now, or if I want to stop it and hack it, I simply pull it once and that will stop the hands moving, and you're able to, I suppose, very quickly set the time. Some people will really like that. But you do have to select the date by pushing in that little button there. So that's a little bit fiddly. But normally when you put a watch on like this, it might be because you're going to keep it on your wrist for a few days anyway. And the date complication is visual interesting, I suppose. But also I imagine that not many people actually bother with setting the date. Because it is a small feature, you don't really notice it if you're not looking. And I imagine that a few people don't actually mind. And what's pleasing is that the date feature is there. And I think that is the bit that people will really like. And I imagine that they don't set the date. So far I do set the date. I like the date being correct for some reason. But anyway, there you go, the Omega Speedmaster Mark II wheel intrigue. And hope everyone is well, and speak again very soon.